Between 1924 and 1950, Georgia Tann kidnapped more than 5,000 newborn infants and then sold them to the ultra-wealthy on a nationwide black market child trafficking network. More than 500 of those infants would die before being sold due to abuse, neglect, disease, and malnutrition. Some of the babies were ripped from their mother's arms right off the streets in broad daylight. They were kidnapped from churches and daycare centers where they may have been playing. In most cases, the infants were taken directly from hospitals after doctors handed newborns over to people they thought were nurses, but they were actually criminals disguised as nurses, all part of a massive black market that sold babies. High-ranking politicians ensured Georgia Tann was protected so that she could continue selling infants to the highest bidder. And as unbelievable as all of this sounds, it is 100% true. Check this shit out.
Tann pulled off her brazen scheme through operating the Tennessee Children's Home Society, a society which, on the surface, was doing the Lord's work, finding homes for orphaned children. In reality, it worked as a cover for Tann to funnel children into her care, only for her to turn around and sell them on the black market for extreme profit. In the nearly 30 years Tann and the society were in operation, she managed to kidnap and sell an estimated 5,000 babies. These weren't orphaned children placed under her care. They were stolen right from under their parents' noses. How? How could anyone get away with kidnapping and selling children for nearly 30 years right here in America? She did it with help from friends in high places. She took children who came from poor families, for the simple reason that poor families at the time didn't have the necessary resources to search for one of their children should they go missing. If families did file a report, Georgia Tann would have it handled by her close friend E.H. Crump, a powerful tycoon and the so-called boss of Memphis. Crump would make sure the reports of missing children were ignored. She also had an elaborate system for taking newborn babies from hospitals and mental wards, bribing doctors and nurses to help protect the children, and then tell their unsuspecting parents that their baby was stillborn. Tann would take off with the baby, with the child's parents believing their newborn to be deceased. She even had a system for snatching children right off the street. She took children from churches or daycare centers while they played with their friends. They'd end up in the arms of a uniformed social worker under Tann's employ, and they'd never be seen by their birth parents again. Once the children were under her care, and their parents were none the wiser, Tann would wipe their identities and sell them to couples looking to adopt, leaving them completely in the dark about where the child came from by falsifying or destroying their documents. Tann pocketed millions of dollars selling children to out-of-state couples, charging a $5,000 premium on out-of-state adoptions. Almost 90% of her sales, which in this context, sales is a truly disgusting word, went to wealthy couples in New York and Los Angeles who could afford the steep pricing of Tann's services, including actress Joan Crawford, who adopted her twin daughters from Tann. It should be noted none of the adoptive parents had any chance to suspect what they were doing was wrong. On its face, Tann's operation was a legitimate adoption agency. Of course, simply adopting a baby and then never having questions about where that child came from isn't possible. But if the adoptive parents ever questioned Tann about issues that arose, things like missing birth certificates or clearly falsified medical histories, Tann had an answer. If the new parents ever had any suspicion that anything fishy was going on, Tann would threaten them with legal action through one of her major accomplices, family court judge Camille Kelly. Judge Kelly used her position of power to sanction Tann's activities and threaten the adoptive parents with taking away their adoptive children if they continued to make a fuss or ask questions. They would also be threatened with being roped into whatever legal ramifications Tann may or may not have faced. I mean, they did use her services, so technically they were involved in an illegal enterprise themselves. And here was a judge telling them they were complicit. Needless to say, this blackmail coming from the U.S. judicial system itself made a lot of folks go quiet.